Yo, what's up guys? It's the Insane Game Freak here. So I finally beat all 3 Fire Emblem Fates games. Just beat Revelations last night. And I decided, since Revelations doesn't have really enough on its own to really talk about in a review that I haven't already covered in the other 2 Fire Emblem Fates reviews, it's still going to be called Fire Emblem Fates Revelations, but the Revelation is going to be me comparing aspects of Fates and Awakening on top of just talking about aspects of Fates I haven't really talked about yet. And this one is going to be story related. So that means it will be spoilers for all 3 games, primarily Revelations in total because of plot reasons. So if you do not want spoilers, kindly leave. And the only reason why I'm spoiling it is, for one, there's a particular thing you have to do to get the full story, and I don't think most people are going to do it. And I'd rather just save them the time and money if they don't want to spend it and just fucking tell them. So that's what I'm going to do. So with all that being said, let's talk about Fire Emblem Fates Revelations Story Edition. And the next edition will probably be characters. So look forward to that. Intro start. Okay, so let's talk the story of Fire Emblem Fates. The short version of this is that the story of Fire Emblem Fates is pretty fucking bad. That's just, it's so unnecessarily bad too. That's what pisses me off. Because you literally, when you looked at Fates just from trailers and just from like what they were telling you, it wasn't hard to figure out what they were doing, and it wasn't hard to make that a good, interesting story. The first one, Birthright, was pretty much going to be Awakening too. And in all intents and purposes, that is what Birthright is. A bit with like less character and interesting moments. But it's essentially just Awakening style plotline. Which, Birthright on its own is just kind of like whatever. Fine, it's enough. We'll take it. Conquest had a interesting plotline just based off of its premise. Instead of siding with Hoshido, you sided with Nohr, which means you went back home. And it was obvious that Garen was the fucking villain because he screams bad guy all up and down his fucking appearance, down to his fucking mannerisms and the insane laugh he has, and down to his goddamn henchmen. So all you had to do was have a storyline of him planning a coup d'etat while also having to follow Garen's order, pretty much kind of lingering in between being a good guy and a bad guy because he has to play up one and the other until he became strong enough take down Garen. That's not what the fuck they did though. What they decided to do was go into this ridiculous direction of explaining plotline shit from the final arc of the game, because it's like, dude, when you introduce the Vala stuff and the whole thing about how you can't talk about it or you'll die or you'll be disintegrated or wiped from the earth if you talk about Vala outside of Vala thing, that would have been fine in Revelations. And guess what? It was fine in Revelations. But instead of just doing a normal coup d'etat storyline that would have been just as fun and interesting, they decided to go pretty much the Revelation storyline without it being the Revelation storyline. So essentially, they know why they have to take down Garen, even though it's not really. And on top of that, it's even dumb because Garen is so blatantly evil. It doesn't make sense why the siblings would question it. It's like Corrin and Azura being so fucking stupid in Conquest. It's infuriating. It makes for more interesting like story elements because now you don't know what the fuck is about to happen because now it's all over the goddamn place. And there are interesting and good moments in Conquest, but it's so disjointed and all over the place and doesn't make any fucking sense. You can't really enjoy Conquest as much as you would have if they just did a simple, I gotta balance myself between being good and evil while playing up the Garen's bullshit while at the same time planning to kill him. But they didn't want to fucking do that because that would have made too much goddamn sense. So what we get is a messy ass story that just ends with a whole bunch of ridiculous bullshit. And it's just like, why in the fuck would you do that? And then we move on to Revelations. And Revelations for a game called Revelations, doesn't have that many real revelations in it. You know what the revelation I came to at the end of playing Revelations? That if you wanted to play for just the story, you know what you should do? You should buy Revelations, and then you should also play you also need to buy DLC. And some of you would say, well, Revelation is DLC. No, I mean, you need to go buy 2 specific Xenolog DLC maps to get the rest in the most interesting part of the plot for Revelations. Because, and I'm going to tell you, because I know people aren't going to be willing to spend money for DLC on top of the DLC. So let me explain. There are 2 Xenologs called Hidden Truth 1 and 2. These Xenologs detail why, you know, Inigo, Severa, and Owain are in Fates, what they're doing in Fates, the history of Corrin. It explains a lot plot-wise, which I am going to explain to you now for those who do not feel the need to buy DLC on top of everything else they bought just to get this plot line. Either that or you can look it up on YouTube, but I'll explain it for those who don't even care to do that. Because at this point, if you played all 3 games, you don't give a fuck about Fates' story. And that's nothing against the game. Fates' story is just not fucking worth being invested into. And this is what pisses me off, that if I want the full Fates story experience, you're making me buy DLC on top of already buying Revelations, which most people consider DLC on top of fucking Fates. That means you have to spend the $40 for either Conquest or Birthright, then another $20 for fucking goddamn for Revelations, and then I think it'll probably turn into, like, I don't know how much the maps are individually, but then even more money, which is probably like another $10 at most, for the fucking DLC maps. So I'm spending $70 around just to get the full Fates story experience. And I'm only really buying Conquest because I can't buy Revelations on its own, which it really should be, because there's no fucking reason why I need to play Conquest or Birthright first. Not at all. I mean, there are some things referenced from at least Conquest in Revelations, but not enough to justify it. So some of you were asking, well, how much information does this 2 DLC maps, Xenolog DLC maps, hold to justify buying them? Well, let me explain. First off, it reveals that Corrin only has really 2 real bloodline family members. He has a cousin in the form of Azura, which is somewhat revealed in Revelations anyway. But here's the fucking kicker. He also has a sister, like a legit sister. And who's his sister, you might be asking? Oh, his sister's fucking Lilith. His sister is Lilith. I'm not going to go through every single little detail about it, but just the short answer is that his sister is Lilith. Anakos is a dragon that essentially went crazy because his dragon nature was overpowering his good nature. So he put out what was left of his humanity. It became its human self. That human version of Anakos, the little bit good that was left, which would eventually die, brought in some of the heroes from Awakening because pretty much the DLC takes place, I would argue, like a little bit after Awakening, because it's like, I heard about these heroes that helped kill Grima. And so, okay, cool. And that's when they pulled in Severa and Inigo and Owain and was like, listen, I need your help. I need you to fucking go and help kill me. Essentially, he called them in there, help kill them. But you would need like a big ass army. So I need you to go to like Nora. Well, I think he was trying to send them to Hoshido. And then Lilith came and fucked everything up. There's some plot stuff there that I don't really want to get into because it's not that important. The point is that he's the one who changes their names and appearances because he doesn't want where they come from to be inherently known. Considering you also got to remember that Lissa, because Lissa also being a royal, Owain would have the Exalt brand. So they had to get rid of that, which is why his appearances changed. Classes changed, but just adding to the appearance changed. The goal was to go to where Lady Makoto was to do this. Unfortunately, they ended up getting sent to Nor due to plot bullshit. And they had to kind of rough it for a while, and that's why all the Awakening kids are in Nor, because of plot reasons. The Xenologue pretty much ends with Lilith taking up her dad's cause, but not being able to tell Corrin anything about his hidden history. And the good Anakos essentially falling to the dark Anakos and pretty much becoming the same being and continually losing his mind, which is why he feels like such a one-note villain at the end of Revelations, which would make more fucking sense if you had put these Xenologues as a prologue to Revelations. If Revelation is going to be touted as the fucking plot line that is the true plot line, then why in the fuck can I not get those Xenologues in there? Because they're pretty important plot-wise. They're good characterization for Anakos, an understanding for fucking Lilith, and an explanation for the Awakening kids. They never still fucking explain Tharja or Cordelia being kids, but that's a whole different story. They never even fucking explain why there's a what-if scenario for like which side Corrin chooses. That's not like a plot thing, that's just a thing you can do in the game. Which I guess is excusable to an extent, but I would think with all this fucking ridiculousness that the Fire Emblem series is known for, especially in this game, you would think, well, maybe they have a plot reason for why you're able to see the pathways of all three. No. And let's talk about Revelations in itself, on top of the bullshit that, you know, to get the most interesting part of Revelations, you had to buy DLC on top of the DLC. We're also going to talk about the plotline for Revelations, which the best part of Revelations plotline is the beginning of it, where you're essentially still fighting to get all your siblings to kind of understand you and to trusting you, because they do the same Vala plotline trick, even though it makes way more sense here than it fucking does in Conquest to do it, because this was supposed to be the plotline you should have done it with. They do the thing where obviously they can't talk about Vala, so they have to kind of convince the siblings while fighting the siblings, which makes for interesting maps and design and situations, and that's fun. Everything kind of becomes less interesting the moment, not really when you hit Vala, but like near the end of the game, because when you hit Vala, then you're fighting all these ghost enemies, and I would say shit kind of gets bullshitty when you realize that, oh look, they killed Scarlet. This girl dies in 2 fucking plot lines. I love it that the only like confirmed couple, one of the only few confirmed couples in Revelations, or in Fire Emblem Fates in general, is Scarlet and fucking Ryoma, because it's totally hinted that Scarlet is totally in the Ryoma and vice versa. And then, oh yeah, Scarlet dies in the true pathway, and I'm just like, she gets barely any characterization in the game to begin with, and she gets killed in Conquest 2. That means she gets killed in 2 plot lines, one of which is the main fucking plot line in the game. Which is bullshit, but whatever. Because it creates a very interesting dynamic for the rest of the game of like, well, who the fuck killed Scarlet, and is there a traitor in our ranks? That's the whole thing it's leading into, which is an interesting thing because you have a character like Corrin who trusts everyone, which he does eventually get punished for later in Revelations, which I liked. And then we find out the reveal of the villain, of the person who, not only the person who killed Scarlet, but also the person who is responsible for some of the situations in Fates. And oh look, it's Gunther. I find this somewhat interesting considering one of the people who's the biggest, who was kind of your bro in the beginning of the game, and you get back in fucking Conquest. I find it interesting enough that he was the villain, and I don't mind that as a twist. My issue is that it doesn't really mean anything in the end game. Ironically enough, he's the only character who is possessed by fucking who's possessed by Anakos who doesn't die. And they do give some interesting characterization of why he did it, and it makes sense. Like, I'm not I'm not necessarily angry at the plotline. I'm just angry of how little it really mattered in Endgame. Because it really didn't mean shit other than you killed Scarlet. I would argue that probably means you also killed Makoto at some point. Because I don't think that's ever really fully fleshed out. It's just kind of assumed that I would assume he's the same shadowy figure. So my assumption is you're probably the one that killed Makoto too. Or whatever. And he's the only character who doesn't die. So Scarlet dies, the character had barely any characterization, and dies literally for like just for a dickish ass reason. And then the fucker who killed her is the fucker who lives. He's like the only possessed Anako's puppet who lives and served no other purpose in the plot other than that. But he gets to live. Alright, whatever. And then we get to Anakos himself, and he's pretty much a one-note villain, like I said before. And the Xenolaw makes him more relatable and interesting as a character. And then you fight him in Revelations, and he's just kind of like, I am a forgotten dragon. I am the silent dragon. I will kill you all. And then you fight him and you beat him and it's over. They also never explain why the fuck Azura's song kills her in the other two pathways, but there is no reference to that in the fucking in Revelations. There's no reference that the song causes physical harm and would eventually kill her. So for some reason, Azura dies on like two pathways. Because she also, it's implied that she died. Well, it's kind of weird. It's implied she goes back to Vala in some pathways, and in other pathways it's implied that she's dead. The point is, she ain't around in the end of Conquest to Birthright, but she's around here, and they never really explained why the song did that in the first place. Or is that just like a plot thing that only really mattered in that one version? Because that was like a really big gimmick of Birthright, that the more she sung the song, the more damage it would do to her, and eventually she would die from using the song too much. That's never brought up again. And once you figure out, and if you play the other DLC maps, you understand the point of the song and how and why it holds the power it does, and why Azura even knows it in the first place. And they never fucking explain, like, that still doesn't explain why it would kill her. My assumption with Azura's song was always the fact that, like, it's because she's singing a song from Vala, and the more you sing of the song, the more it would chip away at the whole whatever was keeping you tied to the current realm, and eventually it would just either pull you back into Vala or you just fucking die. But they never really make any plot reference to it, so I never understood what the fuck that is. So Fate's story is a mess, but if you wanted the optimum story feel, I would say buy one of the games, buy Revelations, and then buy the two Xenolaw maps, the Hidden Truth maps, and play the Hidden Truth maps first, and then play Revelations as a whole. And you will probably get the best story experience, because Birthright is absolutely worthless plot, and then fucking Conquest is a goddamn mess with slight references that make sense once you play Revelations, but don't really mean anything. So that's really just my thoughts and opinions on Fire Emblem Fates' stories in general, and Revelations in general, and as I said, it's a fucking mess. The good news is I literally don't think it can get any worse than this. It literally, plot-wise for Fire Emblem games, this is rock bottom. You cannot get any worse than this at all. But tell me your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. I'll probably be back later with the talk about the characters and how I feel about them, and some more Awakening and Fates comparisons. Because if you didn't already guess it, Fates has a better overall story than fucking than Fates. But my throat hurts, so I'm gonna end it here. This has been the Insane Game Freak. Life's a game, play to win, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace-o. Peace-o.